Key elements of the free markets. According to Milton Friedman, greed is the strongest human emotion. This is something that most people debate vehemently. However, every human being is ambitious. There is a thin line between ambition and greed. Sometimes they are synonymous. Each one of us has desires that are more than the resources we own. Our wants are unlimited, and our ends of achieving these wants are limited or scarce. This is the basics of economics in the Western world. As such, Milton Friedman argues that the best way society can prosper is to create free markets, where everyone can trade in order to actualize their greed or ambition. Thus, the essence of the free market is to create an avenue where people can use their scarce means to create as many products as possible in order to gain the highest level of rewards or profits. This is the best way we can improve our earning ability to achieve our aspiration. Some capitalist realists go as far as claiming there is no free lunch. These capitalists argue that there is an element of greed in every good or moral act undertaken everywhere in the world. Thus, countries do not go to war to liberate the oppressed. They go to war because there are people who will profit from the war and invasion of a foreign country. Capitalist realists argue that slavery did not end in the United States because it was morally wrong. It ended because America wanted to industrialize and use machines, which were cheaper to run than slave plantations and more efficient. Thus, greed exists in every decision people take. Some call it motive or desire or ambition. Capitalists like Milton Friedman call it greed, and they argue that such greed must be streamlined through trade. In the absence of a free market, any other method of controlling people's greed would fail, like the use of centrally planned systems and totalitarian regimes. Greed would always cause some people to work less and seek more rewards. Greed would always cause some people to be put in prison to do unpleasant jobs that most citizens do not want to do. Thus, Friedman's view is that we should have free markets that would allow anyone and everyone to trade their excesses and gain benefits. This is the ideology that created viable states, and today almost every state has a form of free market where people exchange their products. The government has the duty of setting up the basic elements of the free markets of a state. With the exception of a few countries ruled by dictators and absolute monarchies, almost every country in today's world has some form of separation of powers encapsulated in its constitution. This is the first stage of democratic governance. However, the second stage, which requires the separation of the political establishment from the free market structures, demands the creation of certain institutions and arrangements to safeguard a free market system. The free market system is meant to mobilize the private sector of a country, and in the process, there are some key elements that must be present to safeguard a capitalist system, like number 1, an independent central bank. Number 2, a stock market. Number 3, antitrust laws to promote competition. Number 4, an entitlement system. Number 5, consumer sovereignty. First, an independent central bank is important to set up stable monetary policies. Such policies help to regulate trade within the country and boost trade in private business, which is the engine of growth in the modern state. The central bank oversees the printing of money and the setting of inflationary limits to help regulate affairs. Some aspects of the central bank need to be independent of the government's influence in order to promote trade and also boost the quality of life in a country. An independent central bank ensures that the government focuses on raising funds for public expenditure and also focus on what it must do. At the same time, an independent central bank helps the private businesses to grow. This way, the independent central bank is positioned to set up policies that ensure a win-win outcome and the most efficient allocation of resources for both the public and private sectors. Secondly, a stock market helps companies to raise money either through shares, bonds, or other instruments. This is the convergence point for capital. It is the point through which the most basic units of capital, shares, can be traded. Through this, private companies can be formed to produce things, and also employ people with a fair and transparent reward granted to shareholders. This way, the private sector is fully motivated to participate and engage in the country's economic activities. Thirdly, a free market economy needs antitrust laws that would ensure that the free market ideology is strongly instituted. Antitrust laws prevent the abuse of economic power. It is structured to prevent any business from becoming a monopoly or too big to control a specific industry, while blocking other new entrants. This is because the free market system functions on the basis of free entry and free exit. This means anyone in the country is free to set up businesses to trade in any industry or sector they deem fit. In this wise, it is wrong for any company or individual to engage in practices that would prevent other players in an industry to trade within that industry. Antitrust laws ensure that the markets of every industry are opened and anyone can enter the markets and capture market share without hindrances from others. Among other things, antitrust laws also prevent collusion between a few players in an industry to control the industry. This is what is known as oligopoly. Antitrust laws prevent the biggest company of any industry engaging in practices that lead to the fixing of prices or barriers to new entrants. Companies must act independently and make personal offers to consumers. This is the only way to prevent a few entities from becoming too powerful, that they dictate trends for the society at large. There are many countries and places in the developing world where this practice continues. These countries cannot develop because a few people usurp power and dictate trends to the masses, who cannot set up viable businesses or gain economic freedom, because a few powerful companies control the entire economy. Antitrust laws allow capitalist societies to grant property rights to all citizens who can exercise it, by setting up businesses to trade without restrictions from large corporations acting alone, or with others to control any industry or sector of the economy. Fourthly, there should be a system of entitlement that defines individuals' ownership rights to property. This element of a capitalist society is attributed to Robert Nozick, a political economic theorist. Nozick argues that in a free society, there must be a guarantee for three basic rights: the right to life, the right to liberty, and the right to property. In Nozick's view, the right to property is the greatest source of freedom to the individuals in any society. If the government limits the individual's rights to property, the government is committing a crime against its people. Therefore, the state must recognize its citizens' right to property ownership. Any attempt to limit the individual's right to property directly or indirectly should be challenged. Guarantee individual rights involve the government and its agencies, setting up laws on how individuals and entities within the country can undertake free exchanges, either by original acquisition, acquisition transfer, and/or the principle of the rectification of injustice. Original acquisition is a laid-down legal process through which people can either create their own products or acquire unowned properties in the wilderness. Acquisition transfer is the process where properties can be transferred legally through contracts without fraud or error. Thirdly, there should be a system in any country where injustices in transfers and acquisitions can be addressed, so that there can be fairness in the definition of property rights. Finally, consumer sovereignty refers to the freedom of the individual citizens to choose what they want to spend their money on. Capitalists argue that consumer sovereignty is the greatest source of individual freedom. What this means is that the rational consumer will want to purchase what serves their best needs at any point in time, rather than what the government or elites prescribe for them. What this means is that when a country has antitrust laws and competition laws, the producers who are able to figure out the true needs of consumers will gain higher profits, because they will be serving the consumer better. The rational producer will therefore spend exactly what they need to gain the highest levels of satisfaction for the consumer. This means there would be less waste in the economy and the distribution of resources will be more efficient. Capitalists argue that with these 5 elements, an independent central bank, a stock market, antitrust laws, and a system of entitlement to monitor private sale contracts as well as consumer sovereignty, a nation can create the greatest level of prosperity in a society. The next section will cover the question of how the key arguments of capitalism stand in the face of Karl Marx's communist ideology.